everyone, I am Mecha Random 42, and today we are reviewing the Doctor Who episode Rosa. This is season 11, I believe, with the female doctor Jodie Whittaker. This is episode 3 that we're into, and it aired just today. So if you guys are watching this, I'm recording this October 21st, 2018. Now, so if you guys are new to the channel, for my Doctor Who reviews, I will do a no spoiler kind of quick review and give you some of my thoughts, and then we'll get into kind of some more spoiler heavy, some scene by scene breakdown stuff. I'm not going to give away absolutely everything in the plot, but yeah, there will be a clearly labeled spoiler section in this video. So first off, the non-spoiler sort of review and description. This episode of Doctor Who is called Rosa, and yes, they're actually visiting the American South, Montgomery, Alabama, in the 1950s, in the segregated times, you know, when black and white people had to separate everything in public. You know, you had white-only sections of the bus, you had white-only drinking fountains, entrances, all of these things in the American South in this really horrific time that is a part of American history. And you know, this was kind of an episode I was really dreading watching, because I thought, how are they going to do this? Are they going to be respectful? Are they going to be preachy? And, you know, it really surprised me. They did such a wonderful job. And I know I usually hate everything on my channel, but I was pleasantly surprised by how well they handled the story and how well they handled the companion issues. The Doctor has 2 companions. One is a Pakistani Asian woman, basically. I believe they're Asian in Pakistan. Please correct me if I'm wrong. I don't mean any disrespect with that. But and she is of color, but she's not of African descent. And then you have the black British companion, and he's he's in his like early 20s ish. And then you have the old grandfather who's white because he married the black kid's grandmother. So you have this sort of family dynamic that nowadays we don't think anything of. You know, you can go into a store or you know, a restaurant or whatever. You see couples of all sorts of, you know, colors of the rainbow, shades, whatever. Doesn't matter. You know, we're kind of in that day and age now. But this is such an important thing to kind of discuss, and they did such a great job being respectful and giving you kind of the opportunity to explore and to discuss and have a debate. They show both sides of and I'll get more into that in the spoiler section, but there are parts of this episode where some people say, yes, we still have a problem, which we do still have a problem. And then there's other people who say, yes, but it's a lot better than it was. And I love the way they did that without making it sound super preachy. It really showed both sides, and it kind of allows the audience to have that debate and have that discussion intelligently. Also, it gives us the opportunity to have the history lesson and to show kind of the importance of this historical event from the perspective of somebody who it really has been affected by the progress we have made in society, and not just in the United States, but in the UK and all of these things. And I didn't find this episode to be SJW preachy at all. It really almost hit some of the same notes as City on the Edge of Forever, which I will get into in spoiler sections. And if you guys don't know City on the Edge of Forever, it is the episode of Star Trek, the original series, where where they ended up back in time, and Kirk had to decide to let the hippie almost. She was a civil rights movement, sort of a human rights activist. He had to let her die so that the Nazis would not take over and invade America, and he needed her to die for that. And this episode kind of hit some of those notes. It was not nearly as powerful as that, for sure, but, you know, it hit it in the Doctor Who way. So I was really impressed with this episode. I probably would give it About an 8.5 out of 10, maybe. And there's a few things I do have issues with. Some of the accents and some of the actors, some of the guest actors really don't do American Southern accents very well at all, which I will probably get more into in the spoiler section. But yeah, I would almost say skip the first 2 episodes and just start here, because the first 2 episodes are really weak. This episode also had kind of a weak villain, but this was really more of a, we're really getting the feels for these characters. You know, we're really getting to love some of these characters, and you could just jump into Doctor Who on this episode and be fine. I found the first 2 episodes to be kind of boring. I liked having the setup that you see with you know, the young boy Ryan and his grandma. He's not a young boy, he's like 20. So the young man Ryan, his grandmother, his grandmother's new husband. And, you know, I liked seeing that in the first episode of Doctor Who, but you really don't need it if you're going to just kind of jump in. This is probably a really good episode to jump into. I enjoyed it quite a bit. Yeah, so like an 8 out of 10. Now, we're going to get into the spoilers, so shut the video off and watch the episode before you watch the spoiler section. Here we go. I'm going to bring up some of the pictures and images. You probably already saw the trailer for this episode, so I think you guys know what's going on. So, here we go. And here we are. This is Rosa Parks on the bus. There is the clearly labeled white section of the bus and colored section of the bus, which they did have in Montgomery, Alabama. And yeah, it's an important part of history, like I said, but and this obviously takes place around the events of Rosa Parks, and the Doctor does find some sort of spacey technobabble residue or something attached to Rosa, but yeah, it's there's a reason why they're there, obviously. Oh Lord, it just see that. I was really not. I was really dreading this episode because I was so afraid it was going to get preachy, and I'm really happy that it didn't. But yeah, so our first screenshot, we have this actress playing Rosa Parks, and this is one of my issues with this episode, is her accent is not the best American Southern accent, but she's probably British, and she's so or Welsh or wherever they're filming it now, because I know they film a lot of these, so she's probably British. She probably. I think the American Southern accent is hard for Americans to do unless they're from the South as well. So that was kind of my issue there with her. Now, one of the things that I don't recall Doctor Who ever doing was taking people of color to places that they were very clearly discriminated against, and I might not have been paying super much attention. Like, in the past, they've skirted around the issue with people like Martha going back to the Shakespearean times, with David Tennant's Doctor. And I remember in that episode where Martha went back to see Shakespeare, she's like, is there gonna be a problem? Not exactly white. I love that line, and how the Doctor's like, no, you'll be fine, whatever. And I loved how they played that. But this is really interesting because we get to see flat out conflict and racism in this episode. Now, this couple here that you see on the picture, the wife drops a glove, and of course Ryan, the grandson, the companion, he's like, oh, I'm gonna just hand it to this woman, and this is because that's the right thing to do. That's what you would do, and especially in this day and age where you know, somebody drops something, you hand it to them. Well, I'll you know. We see the blatant prejudice and just horrible attitude of some of the people that was so accepted at the time, and I think still today it's accepted, where he goes to give the glove back to the woman, and the husband just like flat out slaps him in the face, calls him all these names and things, like as much as they can get away with the censor. He uses the term boy, which is so... Oh, don't say it. Don't. No, don't. And I think that's as much as they can get away with the censors. But yeah, and they also they don't really use any really harsh racial slurs in this. They use some kind of mild ones that are still really off-putting. But you know, it's really interesting that they're exploring some of this stuff, because a lot of people forget how bad it was not that long ago. I mean, 1950s isn't a whole long time ago. Now, don't get me wrong, we still have a lot of garbage going on, but, you know, but like I said earlier, we can go into any public place and see people of all sorts of shades of whatever, and it's not a big deal. But, you know, and it's really interesting that they're tackling the subject on the 3rd episode of Doctor Who also. And I did point out already that I do have a pretty big distraction with the accent of this actress, but she does come to the aid, and she's really played to be this noble, almost caretaker, this very strong, and I hate using the term strong female character, but she portrays Rosa Parks as this very strong, I'm going to diffuse this situation, we don't want any trouble, and she kind of takes care of stuff, and she comes to the aid of the doctor and her friends, and she does tell Slap Happy Dan, or whatever the hell his name is, to bugger off in so many words, right? So she does come to their rescue, and then they realize, oh my god, that's Rosa Parks, and the doctor does end up scanning her. And they find out that there's some sort of a time something, like Ultron particles, I believe is what they're calling them. So she has something attached to her that shouldn't be there. And this is why the TARDIS is where they are. When they're trying to go back home to Sheffield, they end up here in Montgomery, Alabama in the 50s. So yeah, it's a typical Doctor Who episode, but they tackle some really, really interesting things. And after some, and of course, after experiencing some, like, oh, I should point out this screenshot too. I skipped over one. So here we see a guy dressed as like a 1950s greaser. Basically he's using some alien tech, and he gets all zappy on the TARDIS, and you know, he can't really get into it because it's got force shields and stuff. So his deal in this whole episode is that he wants to. He wants to change some of the events of this thing. He wants to make the civil rights movement, on all the things that snowballed after this event of Rosa Parks refusing to give up her seat on the bus. He wants to make that not happen, is the idea of this episode. And, you know, we find out some more in a bit, and I'll get into that in when we get to those scenes. But that's kind of his motivation for being here, is that he wants to skew the events of history. Basically, because he's been in jail and whatever, and yeah, he's not a happy camper. But yeah, so of course, the doctor and her friends go through to this to a cafe, diner, bar, whatever. They get some nice old-fashioned 50s racism from Alabama, from all the people there. Oh, we don't serve, you know, your kind here. And he's like, that's good, I don't need any. You know, and it was funny. It was funny how they handled that racism. Just so like, what? And also in like the bar scene, which I probably should have grabbed a screenshot of. They keep referring to the girl. I can't think of her name off the top of my head. They keep referring to her as Mexican, because I'm sure the 1950s Deep South has never seen anybody from Pakistan before. Which is kind of, you don't really think of these things as, you know, you think of it as like a normal everyday thing. There's people all over of everywhere nowadays. You don't really think of how close-minded and how small people's worlds were in the 1950s without the internet, without cell phones, without Instagram, without all these things. Yeah, it's so odd. It's just really odd. But yeah, so they run and they pick up on trails of stuff, and they find this box of alien goodness that makes the doctor realize they're not the only ones that don't belong in the 1950s. Because when we saw the greaser guy, he was in another scene without anybody. So that the doctor hasn't even noticed until now. Oh yeah, there's somebody else here trying to do something, and this is why we're here. And our bad guy of this episode has a temporal displacement device, and that's what you see in his hand down there. He can aim this thing at someone and fling them through time like a weapon. So kind of like how the Weeping Angels would send a person far back in time. Well, this one, he has people flung far forward, or he has it set to fling people far forward. So it's very similar to the Weeping Angels sort of thing. So now our group ends up hiding in a motel, and now only to have a local cop try and intimidate them and blah blah blah, asshole racist 1950s cop dialogue, whatever. So the doctor and the grandfather do their best to insult the jerk with the clever insults that are woven in to their, you know, to this almost interrogation that he's doing, right? And the younger companions were hiding in the bathroom of the motel, but then in this shot here, they ended up climbing out the window because they knew that the cop guy was going to be like searching for them, basically, to try and bust them on something, because, you know, it's the 1950s, and they don't belong there, because, well, a whole bunch of people with funny accents, and a lot of people that, you know, they're racist against in the 1950s in Alabama. I hate using that word over and over again, but yeah, so the younger companions here, they're hiding behind dumpsters after climbing out the window. And now keep in mind, in the 1950s, it's taboo for two grown white adults of opposite genders to be alone in a motel. So of course, the doctor and the grandfather have to kind of pretend that they're married, even. But this is how things were. A lot of people don't realize that you couldn't have two people who weren't married in a hotel room together. They would always sign in under the name Mr. and Mrs. Smith or whatever, because people would talk, right? So now imagine having all four of these people in a hotel room in the 1950s in Alabama. This is actually a really, really important scene, because these two end up having a really interesting discussion about the racism and things. And this is kind of what I was getting into earlier in the no spoiler section here. So he's upset because he really has to watch his temper in the South here, and he's really not happy that there's still so much racism in the world. He asks the question, what's the point? You know, it's not gone. Racism isn't solved. You know, and of course she agrees with him, and she's like, yeah, I've experienced it too. You know, people accuse me of being a terrorist, and they accuse me of being all these things because of the color of my skin, and I have a hard time, and I have to prove myself also. But she, on the other hand, does remind him that because of all the progress that's happened in the last 50 years, that she's allowed to be a police officer, you know, and she says, you know, look at how far we've come in 50 years. Imagine how far we're going to be in another 50. And that's kind of where the important dialogue and discussion sort of comes in with this episode, is because they are showing you both sides of the coin here. They're showing you that, yes, it is still a problem, and we still have a long way to go, but, you know, we can achieve so much. Look at what we've done. And I really love that about this episode. And I know that I'm probably not exactly qualified to really understand the importance of it, but man, it really, there's some moments here that really got me in the feels too. So, but you know, and I really love that this didn't feel preachy to me. This felt like an honest, decent dialogue. It feels like something that would be in Star Trek almost, in the original series. Maybe not quite to the depth that would be in Star Trek, but a little bit here. And that's the other point I really need to make, is that I assumed it was going to be so preachy. I was so afraid to actually review this episode. So I'm really happy that it didn't get super preachy like that. Now, meanwhile, so the doctor sends everybody off on their separate missions, and we finally see the doctor confront this alien guy. Now he's trying to fix something. Like I said earlier a little bit, he's trying to fix something that he feels went wrong in the timeline, but he can't actually kill or harm anyone because of a neural thingy that stops him from doing it. He's got something like in his brain that physically stops him from murdering somebody, right? And he even tries to strangle the doctor. So he thinks that this is like a key point in history to fix, you know, whatever the issues are. And like he really blames I want to say probably the civil rights movement for a lot of the shit that he thinks is wrong when, you know, in his timeline. And I believe they said he ended up in prison or something. Yeah. So they're really implying that he's got an issue with the way the world changed after Rosa Parks stood up to the bus driver and said, no, I'm sitting. And that was kind of a big catalyst here. So, you know, like her being the important civil rights leader. And yeah. So I can kind of see what they're doing in this episode, right? They're almost, this is what I mentioned earlier, they're almost trying to tap into like the city on the edge of forever sort of Star Trek thing where Edith had to die so that the Nazis didn't take over, right? They're not quite getting so to the depth of that episode. I mean, this is still Doctor Who, this isn't Star Trek. But they're really tackling some real world situation and you know, and people, and the whole sci-fi alien time travel stuff, and not making it feel super out of place. And I really appreciate where they went here. So now, of course, while they're on their solo missions, they also had to like find Rosa Parks' schedule and all these things, which I didn't really feel were super important to go over into great detail and comment on. But this one really was. Ryan, the grandson. So Ryan, his mission is following Rosa Parks back and trying to get in with her her group of sort of activists, her group of like-minded people, and one of those people is Martin Luther King Jr. Now, we all know what an important civil rights leader Martin Luther King was, and yeah, so I wanted to grab this screenshot. This is Ryan meeting Dr. King, and that was one of those things where you really feel how important of a moment it is. And we even find out that his grandmother was a huge fan and really admired Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks. She knew every instance of the Rosa Parks historical event. She knew the name of the bus driver. She even like his grandfather's a bus driver. She made her a bus driver, right? His step grandfather. She married this man, and she even said, okay, don't be like this guy, this bus driver who basically was the asshole to Rosa Parks. So she knew this story. She knew this historical event. And just kind of seeing his face light up when he's meeting Dr. King and Mrs. Parks, all these historical figures that are so important to him, especially to his family, to his heritage, to his grandmother, and to the kind of teachings and to the family bond he had with his grandmother as well. Oh man, just the way his eyes light up. And he's such a fanboy. He keeps calling everybody by their full name. Oh my God, thank you, Martin Luther King. Thank you, Rosa Parks. He calls them by their full names like you would when you're meeting somebody famous that you admire, like you would Abraham Lincoln or somebody, It just kind of gave me like little twinges of like joy and delight seeing how he handled that. But yeah, so our group does spend a chunk of the episode trying to keep the historical events happening, because this baddie ends up like going and sabotaging everything, so they kind of have to make it happen. He's like, oh, I need to sabotage the bus. I need to change the bus driver's schedule so it's not this bus driver. He tries everything he can to throw it off, and they end up fixing it anyway. And of course, Ryan here sends the guy back really, really far back in time. He modifies the thing, and he's like zapping him here, sending him back in time, so the guy can't interfere anymore. And of course, we end up getting the final scene where the doctor and everybody have to stay on the bus, not do anything, let Rosa Parks be arrested, let it happen. It's really, and they play to your emotions with all the music and stuff. And I didn't want to spoil all that stuff for you too much, because this is still a mostly spoiler free. I mean, you got some spoilers, but you really need to watch the episode to really get the emotional connection and depth. Yeah, this was much better than I expected, and I was really pleasantly surprised that it didn't go super off the rails in the preachy stuff, in my opinion. And I know some people will probably think it did, and I think a lot of people will probably think we didn't need the history lesson again, but it's kind of important in the day and age where, if you guys watched any of my other videos on a lot of the anti-SJW movement stuff, some people need history lessons, so I don't mind having something taught this way every now and then, so that people kind of can remember where we've been and how far we've come. So yeah, I when I have something nice to say about an episode, I don't want to give you guys every single detail. There's a lot I left out of screenshots. There's a lot of stuff I didn't show you guys, because I really recommend watching this one. Give it a shot. I don't think you will be very lost if you just jump into this. You get pretty much everything you need to know. You get that, okay, the grandmother died. She married, she's a black woman in England, married a white man. You get a lot of that stuff. You get a lot of why you get a lot of why the choices of companions seem a lot less diversity casting. And when they're going to tell stories like this, I don't think they could any other way. And I think it really, really benefited the story having the cast they do. So, what did you guys think of this episode? Did you watch this episode? Did you like this episode? Did you hate this episode? Tell me what you think in the comment section below. I have Twitter. I have Patreon. This episode actually went up a little early on Patreon before everybody else got to see it. So if you want to see some of my videos early, go over to my Patreon. I do a lot of stuff over there. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys on the next video or live stream. Bye!